Good morning, everyone. It looks like we are a little bit late, but it's not true because, as you know, in the academic tradition, we've got so-called academic quarter. And now if we add to the 15 past 10 the quarter, it will be half past 10. So we can say that we are on time. I'm great pleasure and honor to open this meeting. As you know, we've got some kind of tradition. It's a distinguished lectures. Probably we've got the 15 years anniversary of the first distinguished lecturer in our university. And we will be visited here by very important persons like presidents of countries, like president of institutions, president of corporations, and some other very important person. But here we've got someone who is, today we've got someone who is absolutely unique because this is the Reverend Jesse Jackson, founder and president of Rainbow Push Coalition. And by the way, I learned new English word, reverend, because I never used such word. There was no opportunity to use such word in Poland, and even if I was abroad. But at first, I would like you to turn off your mobile, okay? If you didn't do it so far, please do it. And Reverend Jesse Jackson, founder of and president of Rainbow Push Coalition, came to us together with some colleagues. At first, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Jacqueline Jackson, his daughter. And what's interesting, when we were talking, she's here over there, please show us. She has got the same field of interest that mine, so I'm really happy of this. I would like also introduce Mr. James Gomez, Director of International Affairs, Reverend William Hall, personal assistant of Reverend Jackson, Mr. Don Terry, writer of Reverend Jackson, and Lee Wing, executive director of the Silicon Valley project in Rainbow Push Coalition. Okay, so, and I would like also welcome warmly the special guest who decided to devote their time and decided to join us today. It's Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Portugal to Poland, Maria Amelia Paiva. I can say our friend. She was visited us also yesterday when we've got some special, another event for students. I would like to welcome to His Excellency Ambassador of Austria to Poland, Dr. Thomas Buschbaum. And also very warmly I would like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Poland, Peter Gon. And more diplomats like Charge d'Affaires, Graciela Lizette Castenda Gonzalez, Embassy of Mexico of Poland. She announced her participation, but probably he wasn't able to reach us. And również very, very warm, I would like also welcome Paula Nowek, representative of Human Rights Defender in Poland. Paula is with us. Yes, welcome. Dr. Katarzyna Pisarska, founder and director, European Academy of Diplomacy. And representatives from the Embassy of USA, Gabriel Reyes, Monica Kołątaj, Sydney Barlow, Kasia Lafayette, if I pronounce correctly your names. You are a Kasia Lafayette? The last one, okay. And a special welcome to Ms. Małgorzata Dzielak. Why special? Because she was and she is engaged a lot of the organization of the visit from the USA Embassy side. Thank you very much, Małgosiu. And finally, I would like to say some special thanks to Miss Barbara Pianowska-Kuraś, who is absent, but she's an executive director of Corporate Communication Office Polish Airlines Lot, which offered a great support in logistics to our honorable guests in their coming from USA to Poland. So thank you very much to the Lot as an institution who I would like also in advance, thanks to the Deutsche Bank, the hands of Krzysztof Kalicki, who support us also. It's not a secret information that he supported tonight dinner with to meet with Reverend J.C. Jackson, because his experience in this field maybe will be very useful for us in the nearest future. We, in our programs, we do not have some special courses devoted to the human rights, because there was need so far. But I think that such topics as business ethics, like corporate social responsibility, they are topics which are relatively close to the human rights. So, Professor Kołotko, may I ask you to conduct the further meetings, and please be so nice and moderate the discussion after the speech of the Reverend J.C. Jackson. Thank you very much for your attention, and I leave you.
Good morning. This is my great pleasure and honor to welcome such a mighty person as J.C. Jackson, the man who is making history, who is the world-renowned fighter, not only in the American dimension for civil rights, who is also the religious and political leader. He's the founder and president of Rainbow Push Foundation, which is working on basis of international multi-race, multicultural path to empower equality and social justice, again, not only in the US, but in this world of our generation. Reverend Jackson started to study at University of Illinois, but that was a long time ago. I'm somehow very sympathetic to this university, because after you left in '64 to join the civil movement of late Martin Luther King, I was there in 20 years later as a senior Fulbright research scholar. But the things changed since. When you moved from Urbana-Champaign to North Carolina State A&T University, where from you graduated in 1964, that was the momentum for the civil rights movement. And recently we've seen also in Poland the great American movie Selma. J.C. Jackson did take a part in the historical march to Selma, which was headed by the great American figure Martin Luther King. But at that time, J.C. was 23 years old, as some of our students today in the auditorium. So it's been a long shot from the time you were walking to Selma and the moment you came to Poland. This is the first visit of Reverend Jackson to Poland, so the more we are proud that you are coming to talk to us here at the Kozminski University. As the magnificent director said, this is basically the business and law school, but we do pay attention to the moral and ethical aspect of not only business, of every aspect of the public life. You have your problems in the US, we have different problems in Europe, but At the very end, I think that we are, all of us, very much concerned about the civic rights and about moving forward. We are very much in favor of rainbow, and we would like to support your pushing forwards. So, Reverend Jackson, welcome to Poland. Welcome to Kozminski. Jesse, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me express my sincere thanks to Dr. Balicki, to President Rector Koźmiński, and you, Dr. Galadko, for this opportunity to share with you on this occasion. I would like for us to start, Frank, with a moment of prayer, a moment of reconciliation, a moment of nonviolence, a moment of peace and reflection, remembering the victims of the Holocaust and Auschwitz, the bravery of Lake Walesa and solidarity, blessing a new democracy in Poland. We pray for the safety of the refugees fleeing war-torn regions of the world. Fill your heads with visions of Dr. King and Gandhi and of Lake Walesa. Fill your hearts with thoughts of peace and nonviolence. Remember the words of the prophet Isaiah, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not lift up swords against other nations, neither shall they learn war any more. Amen. Thank you, Professor Kolodko and university leaders, for inviting me here today to a beautiful country, this historic battleground for human rights and worker dignity, the home of Copernicus and Chopin and Marie Curie, Pope John II, Koźmiński Park, back home where the White Sox play baseball, Congressman Rostenkowski and the Koźmiński family of Chicago. 1.5 million Polish citizens live in Chicago alone. It's an honor to be with you at this distinguished university and speak to you about globalization and human rights. Global foreign policy should flow from our fundamental values. When I ran for president in 1988, I articulated 5 principles for a new American foreign policy. 1, respect for international law. 2, human rights. 3, self-determination. 4, economic justice. And 5, consistency, measured by 1 yardstick and enlightened labor policy. I believed then and I believe now that all nations must play by 1 set of rules. Science has changed distance and time. We're all connected now through social media in real time. There are no more foreigners. With the spirit of solidarity so crucial to our country's history, allow me to frame some principles pivotal to the quest for global peace, justice, and shared economic security. We speak different languages, but we share one message: human rights, workers' rights, liberty, equality, shared economic security. The universal message of human rights is most applicable in the great powers. The Bible teaches us that to whom more is given, more is required. The nation with the most power and the most wealth have the most responsibility. They have the most responsibility to contribute to the creation of a world governed by peace rather than war, and a world stable with shared economic security. Even the superpowers are not above the arc of justice. The arc of justice must apply to all. Pride and arrogance precedes the fall. We must have human rights for all measured by 1 yardstick. Let me give you a frame of reference. I visited South Africa first in 1979. Human rights for all human beings measured by 1 yardstick in the face of race and religious supremacy was considered to be an insult and set off a firestone. 2 tiers of legal protection and authority are not acceptable, whether the stratification is a result of race, religion, political party, or economic status. I was first arrested in 1960 for trying to use the library in the Jim Crow South, Greenville, South Carolina. After 246 years of slavery, The U.S. was then legally divided by race, and segregation was the law of the land. African Americans faced 4,000 lynchings and were barred from using public facilities after slavery. This was the law and culture of the land. In Poland, before the elevation of solidarity as private virtue and public policy, the right of political expression and opportunity for economic growth were not available to all the public. But there are walls of separation. On the other side of the shadowy walls, there's always ignorance and fear and hatred and violence. When the walls come down, we grow together under the understanding that our fates are integrated and interwoven. We had to break down the walls of separation and build new bridges of hope and unity. We must not allow for the legal and political enshrinement of division. We must demand the legal and political enforcement of division, the vision of hope springing forth out of the stream of human dignity. In the New World Order, we're all neighbors. An ocean might separate our nations, but that ocean is but a puddle next to the raging rapids of justice. Let me give you think about the scripture, the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus was asked on one occasion, who is my neighbor? Is it Polish? Is it American? Is it my next door neighbor? Who is my neighbor? In the parable there was a man beaten and robbed to no fault of his own. He was left to die. Who is my neighbor? A minister of his own religion saw him but crossed to the other side of the road and kept walking, taking out pious rituals. Another man of his own ethnicity saw him and went to the other side of the street. The Samaritan, a man of a different religion, different culture, different language, who worshiped God differently, stopped and got him refuge. Beyond color and culture and religion and language is character. Jesus then asked, who is your neighbor? Globalization. We've globalized capital and technology, but not human rights. Workers' rights, children and women's rights, environmental rights. Our world today is fraught with income inequality. The gap between rich and poor are widening. Economic divisions are widening. 1/6 of the world, what I call the surplus cultures, the cultures of privilege. Then we have the deficit cultures, the cultures of pain, 5/6 of the world. Too few have too much, too many have little at all. The richest fifth of the world's people consume 86% of all goods and services, the richest fifth. The poorest fifth are left with just over 1%. I said the richest fifth of the world's people consume 86%. The poorest fifth are left without a 1%. That's immoral, unacceptable, and unsustainable. Until we bring the world into balance, we will not have peace, we will not have justice. The birthplace of the human family is Africa. Human rights for all measured by 1 yardstick. The men of Africa receive the same protections, opportunities, and liberties as the great powers of the Western world. The G20 must include Africans in the execution of its mission to promote growth across the developing world. Europe and North America account for 14% of the world's population. Africa, home to 16% of the world population, occupies only 1 seat. Human rights must prevail when we see an American airstrike hit a Doctors Without Borders hospital. We see immigrants across Europe struggling for housing and hospitality. Russia overwhelming Crimea and threatening the sovereignty of Ukraine. Every nation, every people, every race, every religion is not a part of a great chain stretching across our entire planet. The chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If that link is to shatter, the entire world will fall with it. We must ensure that all life has equal value. We watched with pride when the world gathered in sympathy and solidarity for the victims of the Charlie Hebdo attack. We then watched with shame at the world's silence and the hideous face Boko Haram massacres in Nigeria. When there was a massacre in France, the Charlie Hebdo attack, the whole world watched, observed, and cried and prayed. And Boko Haram did an even more heinous act in Africa. No one looked that way. The renewed violence in Israel and Palestine remind us that Israeli security is inextricably linked to the Palestinian freedom. We must use the same yardstick to measure human rights whenever Israeli security is at stake and Palestinian justice is under threat. As I advocated during my presidential campaign in the 1980s, a two-state solution in the Middle East is the road map toward peace, stability, and mutual coexistence. We must get back on that road and let's define for a moment human rights. The second principle of our movement is that peace and prosperity come only through policy and visions of redemption and reconciliation. The global family is made up of many races, many faces from many places. We are multiracial, multicultural. We practice many religions. No matter the nature of our spiritual beliefs, we live in our faith, but we live under the law. The laws had to change before Obama could become president, before African Americans could become CEOs, and before African Americans could become deans of universities. The hands that pick cotton now pick governors and senators, come to executives and presidents. The law had to change before hearts could begin to heal. In Poland, the law had to change before workers could come together under the protections of one organization. The law had to change before voters could choose their representation. The law had to change before entrepreneurs could enjoy the opportunity of free enterprise. The Royal Court provides us with the discipline of shared security through the practice of responsibility and accountability. Poland was right to recently award $260,000 in reparations to two suspected terrorists who were secretly and legally interrogated in the CIA prison camp in Poland. Its cooperation with the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights demonstrates leadership for an American unwilling to come to terms with its own violation of international law. If Poland can account for hosting the prison, America must account for running the prison. The world community is questioning the escalation of invisible drone strikes and midnight raids aimed at political enemies, with civilian communities often being victims. We deplore the use of chemical and biological weapons and the new weapons more adept and more creative in killing each other. Nuclear disarmament and adherence to international law must guide all the decisions of powerful nations. The U.S.-Iran nuclear deal is an encouraging step towards a world of less conflict and tension. We must seize this opportunity to continue to form mutually beneficial relationships. Iran benefits from American economic engagement. America benefits from an Iran assimilated into the global community. The safety of the world is not dependent merely on the eradication of arms and the end of war. It requires we excavate the root cause of so many wars. We must adopt aggressive measures to stop the proliferation of the world's deadliest weapons of mass destruction. Poverty. Poverty breeds desperation. Desperation creates despair. Despair turns to anger. Anger ignites conflict. We cannot expect peace and security while so many suffer with so little and so few enjoy so much. We must curb the recklessness of the global financial elite. We must not only pay recompense and be held accountable for the damage they inflict on the global economic order. The Polish trade union movement teaches that prosperity is not possible without solidarity. That liberty is not profitable without dignity. So often our trade agreements are lopsided and our treaties are one-sided. China, India, and America have accumulated great wealth since the financial crash of 2008. But the overwhelming majority of those gains concentrates at the very top, what we call the 1%, creating a top-heavy system of weight that the bottom cannot bear. Trade policies between these nations must lift the masses out of poverty and close the poisonous margins of economic exploitation and income inequality, and find the moral center. Three great questions are often asked of mankind. Vanity asks, is it popular? Popularity has its place. Politics asks, can it win? But that there seems to be no boundaries. Morality and conscience ask, is it right? The great answer is that the question of conscience always prevails over popularity and politics, ultimately. So we have only one part of the two names. The third rail is the path less chosen, it's sustainable freedom. Right-wing politicians in America, like political candidates throughout Europe, have grabbed the microphone to demonize and stigmatize immigrants, desperately fleeing war and poverty. They're condemning the patient without addressing the disease. Immigrants go where the grass is greener. If we want more stable borders, we must create a global economic order with a more equitable distribution of resources. Concentration of wealth in the hands of the few leads to disenfranchisement and desperation of the masses. Why do we have mass migration from Syria and other countries? Much of the chaos in the Middle East and the creation of millions of refugees is the result of America, the UK, and the coalition of the willing, immoral and inhumane, unnecessary wars in Iraq and Libya. It resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives, even more injured, resulted in devastation, economic calamity. It inflamed religious divisions, upsetting the delicate relationship between the nations, leading the untold and unending turmoil, new local and regional wars. It's now resulting in massive destabilization of the region with no end in sight. The refugee crisis emanating out of Syria gives the powers of the Western world an opportunity to act with conscience rather than calculation, in accordance with the international treaties and obligations. It gives the Western world a chance to expand with compassion rather than shrink with selfishness. We should never slam the door to the face of refugees. We must open the door and partner with people around the world to advance the commonality and community we all claim. A human community comes out of a shared ancestry. A consensus collaborative effort by the EU, including Poland, urging each country to do their share, will go a long way to alleviating the crisis and burdens being placed on nations. So let's keep first and foremost in our minds the need to save and protect the lives of women, children, and families. To ensure the human rights of all migrants are respected, urge countries and international bodies to adopt and implement humane migration policies. The lessons of World War II: race, religious, and gender supremacy is a suppressor, a divider, an oppressive ideology, dividing people into inferior and superior, not a sustainable model. Uplift the human race and not the master race. The human crisis challenges our moral character and resolve and tests the thesis of how we treat the least of these. Poland has a rich and proud tradition of leaders like Joseph Kuran, who urged Poland to embrace the least of these and for Poland to embrace multicultural-oriented society. Today we cannot give in to the hot rhetoric of ultra-nationalism and reactionary demagoguery. We cannot give in to our worst fears. We stood up against anti-Semitism. We stand up against Islamophobia. We stand up against xenophobia and the incitement of fear around the migration. Remember, Christians and Catholics, that Jesus was born poor, outdoors, on occupation, and under a death warrant. In the face of tyranny, Mary and Joseph, the earthly parents, migrated to Egypt with Jesus. He and his family were refugees fleeing the policy of genocide. Would you lock him out? He lived as a migrant in Egypt until he was 12 years old before he returned to his homeland. You may know that the second largest Polish population outside of Warsaw is in my hometown of Chicago. 1.5 million Polish people now reside in this city. We were received as immigrants but migrated to the U.S. to make a better life. You have made enormous contributions to America, the land of immigrants, over the years. And finally, let us heed the prayer and appeal of Pope Francis. Christian compassion, the suffering with compassion, is expressed first of all in the commitment to obtain knowledge of the events that force people to leave their homeland, and when necessary to give voice to those who cannot manage to make this city of distress and oppression heard. They're all elements that dehumanize and must push every Christian and the whole community to concrete attention. Our martyrs deserve better. We live in a rainbow world. The crisis gives rise to new opportunity to not just adjust, but to embrace the changing world in which we live. The world is a rainbow of people with formerly monochromatic nations becoming more diverse with each passing year, more multiracial, more multicultural, more multi-religious. In today's world, half the world lives in Asia, half of them in China. 1 billion people live in India, next door to therefore Pakistan, and both are armed with weapons of mass destruction. 1/8 of the human world lives in Africa, 1/4 of them in Nigeria. The U.S. is not even a majority in its own hemisphere, where more people speak Spanish than English. Most people in the world are black, brown, yellow, young, female, non-Christian, and don't speak English. We must learn to live together. If as moral human beings we want to end violence in the world, unilateralism is a dead end. The lost sheep of which Jesus spoke must be found and fed and healed. We've come back full circle to a profound point that Dr. King made when he spoke out against the Vietnam War in 1967. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. The true revolution of values will soon look uneasily upon the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. We still have a choice today, nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. We must find new ways to speak for peace and justice throughout the developing world. The third lesson of our movement lasts: if the playing field is even, everyone has the same chance to succeed, the results matter. The results have value. We now have a world that enforces different rules for people with different bankrolls. Meritocracy is empty without equality. I say meritocracy is empty without equality. The march for justice shifts the earth on our feet. Just as the cry for equality thunders throughout the sky in Greece, the Great Britain, in Poland, and in America. Why is it athletes of different races or religion can achieve together on the football field or the basketball court, and whether winning or losing accept the outcome in glory or pain? And you have the Athletic Olympics and the Trade Olympics next door. The Athletic Olympics accepts the outcome, the Trade Olympics do not. Why are Athletic Olympics so different? Whenever the playing field is even, and the rules are public, and the goals are clear, and the referee is fair, and the score is transparent, we can all accept the outcome. You couldn't have a soccer match if players from one side of the town start with 3 goals and players from another side of town start without any. You couldn't have a football match if the nets were wide for one team and narrow for the other. Only when the playing field is even can we all cultivate our talents and bring them home for harvest. When the Third Reich failed, apartheid failed. Race supremacy in the U.S. failed. Lynching as a practice failed. The spirit of Selma and the way of Warsaw are alive. We see it in Chile, where students demand affordable college education. We see it in Greece, where voters demand equal justice for rich and poor. We see it in America with the expansion of health care access and affordability. We see it wherever people are struggling for freedom from the oppressor and occupier. We see it wherever people protect the innocent from police attack. We see it wherever people help children crying for a crust of bread. We see it in the outstretched arms and joined hands marching for movements of peace. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said we must learn to live together or die apart as fools. He urged us to find common ground, to identify common interests. There will be no peace until lions and lambs lie together. It's a strange combination because strong and greedy lions eat lambs for sport, and lambs run from lions because of their ferocity. But the message is until the strong and weak find common ground, there will be no peace. What would make an arrogant and powerful lion agree to lie down with a lamb? What would make a weak and defenseless lamb agree to trust a lion long enough to lie still? Only one thing: they have mutual interests. Coalitions of unlikely partners are built on mutual interests. Neither the lamb nor the lion want fire in the jungle. Neither want to be trapped with undrinkable water or acid rain on their backs. And so it is today that the golden rule must not be repealed. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We have learned to survive apart, now we must learn to live together. Young Americans and young Polish students, I urge you to dream. Dream beyond your circumstances, beyond your habits, beyond the limits of culture. Dream choose minds over missiles. Dream, choose coexistence over co-annihilation. Dream, choose negotiation over confrontation and intimidation. Dream that someday swords will be broken and beaten into plowshares. Spirit and faith will always be tested, but faith can move mountains. Faith helped Moses march out of Egypt and across the Red Sea. Faith helped Joshua bring down the tumbling walls. Helped Jesus turn crucifixion into resurrection. Faith kept Mandela alive following 27 years of jail, long enough to liberate his own jailer. Faith helped Lake Valencia rally shipyard workers to inspire and bring down tyranny and democratize a nation. Dr. King's lesson still lives. The arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. Justice must roll down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Let us live together, rise together, come on up for the rising together. The vision we create in our minds is calling. The road we carry in our hearts is waiting, and so we dream, and we keep hope alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. I've been asked by a certain journalist why I have invited Jesse Jackson to Poland. This is the economic school. You hosted here several Nobel Prize winners in economics. Well, by the way, Jesse deserves Nobel Prize in Peace. But why I did so? Because I think that in this great country of Poland, we do need much more debate about what multiculturalism is, how to teach and learn ourselves to be more open, to be more tolerant for different race, for different culture, for different custom. And I'm teaching my students sometimes that, well, we should not follow exactly, step by step, American economic and financial policy. But as far as the American attitude to strangers, to minorities, to people which look differently, which cook differently, which pray differently, that is what we may have learned in Poland, maybe even more in Poland than in Europe as such. So the question, and that is where the title, Globalization and Human Rights, is from, how much of chance we have in the long-term future. Again, it's a very long shot. It will be never the same what we have accomplished over the centuries in the US. But how much we can go to this direction, which I think is only sensible future for the mankind, contrary to clash of civilization, which is to some extent taking place here and there, maybe more there than here, but we are feeling it somehow in Poland. I'm professor of economics. Preaching and teaching is an easy part. Much more difficult is to answer difficult questions. So now it is the time for comments and questions to our honorable guest. So who would like to address his question or issue to Reverend Jackson, please raise your hand and introduce yourself.
I'll be the first brave one.
Okay, Kasia.
Pisarska.
She was introduced. This is the founder and president of European Academy of Diplomacy, which is also a very multicultural institution. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Reverend Jackson, thank you for these inspiring words. They were very beautiful. And I think, you know, we're all here very proud to come from Poland because we talk about the legacy of solidarity. We talk about the legacy of human rights as the basis of the workers' movement in Poland. But the last few weeks or months have come as a big surprise to this country. Why? Because with the refugee crisis, we have found ourselves seeing in a mirror a face that we did not necessarily like, a face that was afraid of the other, a face that was saying no to people we did not know, people we never met, people that we thought are just different and should not come here because we are the way we are and we have the customs that we do have. And many of those people talked about mainly the clash of civilizations, saying those people have different values, those people think differently, they will impose their customs on us. What would you say to, I would say, unfortunately, 10 or 15 million Poles who in their heart think just that way?
Thank you. Behind the walls, or if there's a wall, there's a sunny side, and a shady side. And those on the shady side have a diminished view of the world. But behind the wall, which we don't see the other side, there's ignorance and fear. When the walls come down and bridges are built, we all can share the sunshine. We can see more clearly. One need not go any further than the damaging devastation of Poland in World War II. In spite of the strong will of Polish people to assert their humanity and self-determination and strength of character, Poland did not bail itself out. People who did not know Polish people, who had never been to Poland, fought to liberate it and invested in its economic reconstruction. So Poland did not come back by itself. It needed help. And one had to make the case, why would some people help Poland who needed help themselves? It was a morally right thing to do. Now we have a refugee crisis triggered by the actions, the arrogant actions of the coalition of the willing. We were told that Saddam Hussein was this huge threat to the human race, to the Western world. There were weapons of mass destruction. The coalition of the willing joined together and overthrew a country and its government. As opposed to using some orderly process, negotiation and time and coalition, we chose to invade, occupy, and destroy a country. Ended up that the weapons that we had sold Saddam are now being used to shoot at us, for example. We didn't stop. We went on to do the same thing with Libya. And so because of our own actions, we've driven the refugee crisis, and now people in desperation are coming home to us. The formerly desperate must not turn on the new desperate. That's my appeal to Polish citizens. Don't turn on the new desperate, for they are desperate. And you have three options, I think. One option is to lock them out at the border. Can't come in. That's a dead option. Another option is to find out why they're there in the first place, which should touch your heart. Other is even at least some temporary asylum. But locking them out is not an option in the human rights sense. They're not leaving home because they're just restless. Leaving home because of wars triggered by the coalition of the willing. We've got the same crisis right now in the U.S. Trump is campaigning on the notion that there are 11 million immigrants in the country. He's kind of focused on Central America. We share 2,000 miles of border with Mexico. It's not only it's Mexico, South Central Latin America. But these are countries that we exploited for economic reasons for a long time. Really gave rise to the strength of Cuban Castro, as a matter of fact. But it's not just Central America, it's Haitians. Where one of the rules is say Cubans come in as before the Cold War, Haitians die at sea because you're black. And you're not politically, you're economic refugees. Made that little distinction. There are students there on student visas. So the idea of gaining traction politically, the idea of sending the largest deportation in the history of the world is gaining traction. It should not, it must not. And I hope ultimately it will not. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
My name is Paulina Bednarz-Łuczewska. I am a teacher researcher here at the Kozminski University. First of all, thank you for reminding us something that we sometimes forget, the priority of moral values over, well, organizational issues. I mean, we know we we will deal with a lot of problems trying to accommodate newcomers to Poland and to Europe, but we should not forget about the moral values underlying such a decision. But I think as Katarzyna Pisarska drew the picture is somewhat unfair to us as a community too. We are proud of our solidarity movement, of the changes that took place in Poland. On the other hand, with shame, we discovered that there are groups of people who are much worse off than they used to be in the previous system. They are small marginal groups of peasants of the national fields, of some workers. We even shamefully sometimes discovered that middle-level solidarity leaders live now in poverty and frustration. Because moral values have priority, but there's also the question of wisdom, how to do it wisely, work every day so that it wouldn't be just that one moral decision to let someone in, but also to avoid hell created in ghettos for the people we don't understand and we cannot help. So if you could share also some words of wisdom with your experience with ethnic, cultural minorities, once we welcome everyone in our home, what to do to make it our common home and not a hell for the newcomers and for frustration for both sides.
Thank you. The lack of development by those at the bottom of the solidarity movement's promise. The lack of a fairer distribution of resources is not caused by refugees in the first place. And so they should not be scapegoated as why there's not been a fairer distribution of resources. And what's affordable education, affordable health care, adequate housing? That should happen in a nation this blessed, this stable, this democratic, should not get trapped in one part in two names driven by fear rather than hope. You would undermine the moral authority of this nation to have desperate people at your borders. For when you were desperate as a people, other nations opened up to you. I mean, one could have made the case, given the plight of African Americans, when Polish citizens began to come to the U.S. in the 40s in great numbers, for example. Blacks and Latinos didn't have public accommodations. We didn't have the right to vote. We didn't have fair housing. We survived 246 years of slavery and lynchings. One could have said, lock the Polish people out. But we could not, would not, did not. We learned to coexist. We had to make the accommodation. And now we're still learning to live together. So the fundamental premise you raise is that those who have not realized the fruits of solidarity must get them with or without refugees. It's not a zero-sum game. As the desperate come in, those who are poor get poorer. We have found in America that the refugees have contributed more to the economy than they've taken out. They contribute taxes and to the social order without receiving them. In other words, they are they're net investors. They pay taxes, they work harder, and they're desperate. But what is first of all, I think, most important is our own sense of humanity. Do you lock them out? Is that an option? Is locking them out an option? That cuts down on one option. Locking them out is not an option. And is finding out what role we played in making them be in their predicament. Was Poland a part of the coalition of the willing in the Iraq attack? You're a reason why they're at the gates. Now we live with the consequence of our choices. Bland Bush rallied the troops of the willing. We find ourselves now living with the consequence of a bad choice. So now humanity is on trial. And when it was determined that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, President Bush said, well, that's just the way I felt at the time. But because they're not in the world court, he's unaccountable. No nation can live above the law unless it be lawless and unjust, as opposed to lawful and just. So I said the refugee problem is our problem. It belongs to all of us. So since locking them out to perish is not an option, I remember, well, not I remember, but I read where a number of Jewish citizens came to the U.S. on a ship called the St. Louis. They were locked out, sent back to Germany to perish. Locking people out in desperation is not a good option. It's not moral, it's not practical, it's not a good thing. So we must make room for them. At the same time, don't ignore those who are here who are already desperate. The poor of Poland today must likewise be addressed. When they come in, they bring in creativity, they bring in more market, they bring in work, effort, creativity, and there's a great demand upon to produce more food, more health care, more housing, more education. Either you make room for them or you lock them out. And since it's not a real humane option, let them in. And the economists and these must figure a plan to include them. Inclusion leads to growth. The growth everybody wants. What makes America great is the fact it made the basic decision of letting them in. Them and they became us and they became us and we. We built a great nation. I used to make the case that when my grandmother when we were growing up, we didn't have a blanket, a cover over our bodies in the wintertime. We didn't freeze and we didn't have heat, central heat. She would take patches of old sheets and clothes and coats and cut them out, wash them and put them on a big table. While they were apart, they were just rags. It may have been silk, it may have been rayon, may have been wool of some other texture, may have been plaid, may have been plain. While they were on the bed, that they were just rags of useless value. She would take a strong cord and connect them. What was rags became a quilt, a thing of beauty and culture. Poland cannot exist in the New World Order as a monochromatic race of people with one religion. That's not the wave of the New World Order. The world is more rainbow, more global, more connected. And one cannot have the benefits of the New World Order and not accept its responsibilities. One cannot accept the benefits of the New World Order and not accept the responsibility.
Thank you. Okay, there is the question, please. Introduce yourself.
Okay, Janusz Dmochowski. I would like to say comment or make a statement as a member of the Friend of Kościuszko Association in United States.
But be brief, please, okay?
Okay. I would like just to say that the Polish legacy, if you are in Poland, is that last will of General Tadeusz Kościuszko, who was the friend of Thomas Jefferson, was to give his money to free slaves in America and educate them. So it's a good point to remember this person and who promoted the human rights in America and fighted for freedom of Polish peasants. He was called Prince of Peasants because he was fighting for democracy and human rights also in Poland and the United States.
Well, you know, it's a good thing. We love martyrs. We resent marchers. Because marchers obligate us to act in certain kinds of ways. We'll often use the statement of a great martyr or a great leader to say, this is who we are. It may be that's who he was. The question is, do we admire him or do we follow him? If we admire him, he is a great guy, worthy of a stature. If we follow him, we'll accept his philosophy and make room for those who are locked out. I do not think in the desperate situation that people now find themselves walking down the street with whole families, that the option of locking them out is an option. Plus, Poland is such a great country, and such a blessed country, in part blessed by its own efforts, but the efforts of sacrifice and investment of so many others. Poland did not come up from the ashes by itself. Investment, alliances, protections, sharing, and care. No one said Poland must come up. It's not our fault that Hitler marched through here. It was everybody. It was nobody. It was not our fault. It was our obligation. It was not our fault. It was our obligation morally to do something about it. And we finally belatedly got involved in that war, and we were part of the reconstruction. It was the right thing to do. For some people, it meant an immigration toward Europe and America. Others, it meant staying home rebuilding. But much of that came from alliance with other people. And that's the best of our humane tradition. We talk about the income gap and the wealth gap. It used to be east-west, now it's north-south. Those at the bottom are going to keep coming northward where the grass is greener and the water is cleaner until there's some reasonable fairness. They cannot be stopped.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's Gavin Ray from the Social Science Department at Koźmińskiego University. Thank you very much for speaking, first of all. I'd like to ask something about racism, because the question of immigration at the moment into Poland is not really a serious economic question. We've had 2 million Poles leave the country over the last 10 years, and Poland's been asked to take 10,000 refugees. So there's not a question of numbers or how is it possible to take 10,000 refugees. In fact, there should be far more immigrants coming to Poland. I'm an immigrant from the United Kingdom. Most of the Polish people have been going the other way, but I'm one of the small drip coming to Poland and hopefully have contributed to the culture of the country. So the question is about racism. At the moment, one of the main arguments against refugees in Poland is about Islam. We hear very leading politicians in Poland talking that refugees would like to set up a caliphate. We have the president saying that they will bring diseases to the country, which is contrary to what the World Health Organization says. This, to me, seems a new form of racism. How can we deal with this rise of Islamophobia?
Well, you must understand that racism is a mental disease rooted in fear, where hope has been evacuated, hope has been wiped out. And you have to counter it with good information, because it grows in ignorance and fear. It leads to hatred and leads to violence. 10,000 people cannot corrupt the society. We've been told by Trump that the Mexicans have come, they're criminals and they are people of the lowest esteem. They should not be welcomed. If you look at America's construction, the contributions far outnumber those who are lawless. And so racism is a factor, and The extent to which racism is a factor, racism and anti-Semitism have the same notion of stereotyping a people by, after all, the Second World War, I think 55 million people were killed. That was triggered by Christians. And America was a slave-holding country. The leaders were Christians. The lynching that took place 4,500 after slavery was abolished. Most took place after churches on Sunday. They were Christians. The Ku Klux Klan were Christians. So one should not stereotype a race, a religion based upon that. And I would hope that Islamophobia will not dominate the scene. Again, Poland has grown with such tremendous strength, almost 40 million people now, and growing with a sound economy. And to accept the burden of racial fears is too great a burden to bear. You can make room for 10,000 people or more and still be an even greater nation, because you have, in addition to having a good head, you have a good heart. And to have a strong head and a weak heart is also a short-term duration. Strong head and heart, and spirit must go together.
Thank you. A gentleman here, please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Benjamin Berg. I'm a middle school teacher. I brought my students from Ursunov up here to hear you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to hear your voice again. I heard you speak in Philadelphia back in the 1980s, and it's music to the ears. My question is, what can students do today? What actions can they take to help improve and promote humanity and human rights here in Poland and wherever they end up going to?
Okay, thank you.
You know, Pope Francis made a recommendation that the churches take the lead in receiving families. Churches have the room to receive families. It ought to do just that. But labor and solidarity should do that as well. Universities ought to make room as well for students. After all, when I look in this room, I see by and large a great body of Polish citizens, but the New World Order is not as white as this room is. The world that we're connected to by Twitter and Facebook and social media, the world is a rainbow. We left Chicago and woke up here 8.5 hours later. We're neighbors, we're not foreigners. Different languages, perhaps, with the same message. Half the world, I repeat, is Asian. Half of them are Chinese. The U.S. and Russia together about 6% of the world's population, dwarfed by the population of India or China. Most people in the world, in North America, we're 1/3. Central America is 2/3. Most people in the world are yellow, brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, young, and don't speak English. Whites must be a member of that world community. You cannot live in isolation. You have so much to offer, you need not be threatened by it, because you are enhanced by it and you enhance it at the same time. Students in this room would be Muslim or Jewish or Hindu, as the case may be, could only enrich the learning experience. I was saying to my daughter coming over here today and last night that one has to come in some sense to Poland to appreciate the Jewish anguish and fear about World War II. One cannot really appreciate in depth the sensitivity, the pathos from America looking this way. One has to appreciate what happened here and the way it happened here and how extensive it was, to appreciate why certain reactions are what they are. So learn, and part of the university experience about it is learning how to cope. If you come to the university as a freshman and leave with the same values, just 4 years more of it, it's not been a good experience. You come to change, to grow, to learn to cope. And the more you cope, the more qualified you are to be a world citizen. When President Clinton won the race against Bush and McCain, they got more white votes than Clinton got. He got more white, black, and brown. His multicultural experience gave him more breadth and depth and not just height, and he won. In the New World, increasingly, those who have height, depth, and breadth can be better partners, better neighbors, more trade, more growth, and more development.
Okay, and the student over there, please. I guess you are the student. You look a little bit younger than we.
I'm Marcin Bargański, a student at Koźmińskiej University. My question is, the whole idea is really beautiful. I mean, letting people in, letting people out, mixing cultures. I like that. But the question is, what if the second side is intolerant for us? If they don't tolerate our culture, if maybe the other way, where the tolerance ends, and like if we mix two cultures like Islam, which is based on Quran, and the law, so the law is allowing for different things in Poland and in Islam countries.
I mean, if those who are coming in are not tolerant of you, am I reading you correctly?
This is what I mean. Difference in law, which are in one culture and in the second, how far we can allow to involve to influence
I'm not sure I understand.
on our law system.
Help me, somebody. Assimilation. Well, assimilation certainly involves overcoming color shock and religious shock and finding out what makes us who we are is measured by our behavior, not just our appearance. I think that's why Jesus was asked a question, which to me is an interesting kind of question about refugees and like, who is my neighbor? It's an interesting philosophical question, who is my neighbor? Obviously not talking about who is in the house next to me or the block down the street. And he gave the parable. And the parable is worth searching. It says a man was beaten, no fault of his own, as in those who are refugees, no fault. It wasn't their fault that we decided to tear up their country and bomb their culture. No fault of their own, and that they are desperate. And we helped to drive them to where they are, by the way. And he said that one man saw the beaten man lying there dying, and a reverend, a man of God, and walked to the other side of the street and kept walking. Another man of his own ethnic group saw him, his ethnic brother, and he walked and kept walking. The other man, the Samaritan from a different country, different culture, who worshiped God differently, helped him up and got him some medical help. Who is my neighbor? Based upon behavior, not based upon religion. What was suggested in the earlier question is that if Poland remained as it is today, there's some Polish citizens not getting their share of houses and health care now. Why? It's not because of refugees. Why are some so bountifully wealthy, and others, even as Poland is constructed now, still cannot get a share of the solidarity dream? That means that even on this day, there is not a fair enough distribution of resources. But 10,000 people will not alter their condition at all. And I think that's why the number 10,000 is such a telling number. Didn't say 200,000, say 10,000. Infinitesimally small number of people. It's more principle than numbers. More principle number. I would like to think it's not race, but if it is race, let's grapple with it as a society. Because becoming anti-racist in the face of racism and abolitionist in the face of slavery and becoming more sensitive to the rights of women and people of color has to make us better, bigger people. If you want to leave here and go to the UN, you must grapple with a more realistic view of the world. If you're going to France, you must see the world differently, or UK, you must see the world differently, because the world cannot be limited to what it is today. Yes, ma'am.
No, first here, please, the gentleman.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank
Good
you,
morning.
the university, for bringing this lecture. Thank the Reverend Jackson for this opportunity. I'm asking a question, very direct, because I've asked the question severally. Can we say the new economic order is properly being followed? Why am I saying this? When we talk about globalization,
Raise that question again.
I said, can we say the new economic order that we are following now is now the rightful course? Why am I saying this? I ask the question because globalization and poverty among the ACP is great. When you see poverty in Africa, it's not improved, despite the fact that it's economic improvement all over the world. Why? Because the economy itself, the progress is skewed in the world. Because when we talk about ACP, and when we talk about economy, we refer to agriculture precisely among the African region. We are having a situation where we have subsidization of the economic agricultural products. In certain countries, this is where Africans, where they have economic of growth. Because when you go there, you see poverty ravaging everywhere. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a diplomat from Nigeria. And I'm highly disappointed that the New World Order is based on poverty. I served in Greece, and I've seen poverty written in many faces. I was in Spain. It's the same. Can we call it globalization of poverty? Because this is what I see there. Thank you very much. I want to know your opinion, sir.
Well, that's what it is, globalization of poverty. My point, we've globalized capital and technology, but we've not globalized human rights. We've not agreed to establish a floor beneath which no human being will fall. And in these countries, we've also almost globalized for the top 1%, more billionaires than the world has ever known. I mean, millionaires is a subset of the billionaires. I mean, fewer and fewer have more and more education, more and more technology, more and more capital, and more have less and less. And so long as that gap keeps growing, you're going to have these fights and tensions because people are fundamentally insecure. And I hear things in America like, well, we believe in capitalism, and you can't, well, we do, but the banks were bailed out. That was socialistic. Social Security is socialistic. The highways are socialistic. Public education is socialistic. And so you have capitalism for the very poor and socialism for the very wealthy. The New World Order is not a good world order until there's a fairer distribution of resources, because you'll never have, for those of you who are business students, it's hard to invest in war zones. Hard to invest where there are radical divisions. In the New South of America, for example, where there was once segregation, all the industries are now moving south. Automotive south, and big athletic events moving south, because the environment's less hostile. So long as you had the radical division of race and fear and the like, it was not good grounds for growth and for investment. So one reason why business students must have an ethic of inclusion, I would say that if you don't see that those who are locked out, it's like a one-eyed quarterback, a one-eyed footballer. You can't see half the field, and what's over here is market, money, talent, location, and growth. Suppose you couldn't see black footballers in what you would call soccer. You couldn't see them. You couldn't be as good as you could be. And so, especially for business students, the markets that you seek, those markets are multiracial. And those markets are, in fact, enhanced by skills of poor people. Poor people need skill development. When they get that, they are progressive, developing people. Ignorance is very expensive, and racism is very sick.
Thank you. And the one last question, please.
Hi, my name is Maud. I'm studying in Koźmiński. I'm coming from France. And my question is about the rainbow nation that you were talking about, because France has a tradition of immigration for a very long time, and we already have this rainbow nation you're talking about. We have free healthcare, we have free schools. But the problem is racism has never been that high in my country, and I'm wondering what I can do about it.
Thank you.
There is one more question from student.
Let me
Okay, this one.
try to answer that. I want you to frame it once more. I want to hear you. I'm be sure I hear you. Say it one more time. Once more. I'm trying to process what you ask.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what I can do about racism in already rainbow nation. What can I do about it?
First, within your own, the leader that you're looking for to change the world, you saw in the mirror this morning. It all starts with you. It starts there. It can't stay there. You and your classmate, your partner, your friends, your fraternity, it starts with you. It's not they and them, it's us and me and my and I. It starts. What we found in 1984, after President Reagan had done so amazingly well, male vote, white working class people, I think, exploiting their fears, Democrats were set on trying to retrieve or get back the white males that they had lost to Reagan. I thought our future was not in the mirror, but in the windshield. It was that way, not this way. That the future was in a generation of youth becoming adults, and blacks and browns and women and environmentalists and gays and streets. So that was a whole new world out there. And so there became a tension between the Democratic leadership class, DLC they call themselves, trying to retrieve the white males, or those who are trying to go forward to a new paradigm of relationships. Ultimately, inclusion won over exclusion. In 1965, African Americans had not been able to vote in the South since 1870 for 95 years. Watch this. Blacks got the right to vote in 1965. White women got the right to serve on juries in 1967. Students got the right to vote as 18-year-olds in 1970. On campuses, we could vote in 1974. Bilingual in 1975. And new rules of proportionality in 1988. So our democracy had to mature and grow to be more inclusive, to be a full democracy. And so it seems to me so the rainbow was a multiracial, because whether you're Native American, or Latino, or African American, or gay, or Jewish, or straight, or Hindu, we found there was a commonality of interest in things that were basic. We all wanted equal access to education and health care and job security. And that no group should be demeaned and pushed down to the expense for the benefit of another. And we had overcome the entitlement of white male race supremacy. There's a sense of entitlement. And today we have some tremendous problems, even now. And that's because while effort and excellence means a lot, inheritance and access means more. And those who've inherited the benefits of supremacy maintain it. Those who have access to the benefactors have progress. So we're free but not equal. In our society, we are freer but less equal. We're free to starve, free to be malnourished, free to be uneducated, free. So freedom without inequality is radically incomplete. Freedom without equality is radically incomplete. For the most part, these freedoms did not carry with them equality. Many of our freedom allies are not our equality allies. They are against barbaric acts of violence that's embarrassing to them, but not for equality of sharing in land development, education, and job creation, and talent. And our talents are limited. In those areas where it's not limited, we are most prominent in the athletic field. I use athletic analogy and going rather quickly, but China, when they had the athletic Olympics, and they had the swimmers came from one country, and the track stars from another, and the basketball from another, and the trapeze artists from another. It was because playing field was repeat whenever. The playing field is even, and the rules are public, the goals are clear, and the referee is fair, and if there's confusion, a replay, and the score is transparent, we can accept the outcome, win or lose. Now, if the playing field is not even, Muslim has to start with one goal, and someone that starts with 3 goals. It's not a good game, and you don't like the outcome is not a true outcome. And that's true in education, healthcare. Those basic principles have broad application. Now, on the trade Olympics, there's a lot of debate because you got cheap labor versus organized labor. On the trade Olympics, capital determines the winner, not meritocracy. Someone, sir?
Yes, we have still 5 minutes, no more. Where is the student? Okay.
Hi, my name is Paul. I'm a student of Koźmińskiego University, and I have a question. All of us heard about crisis of Syria, and I know that you speak about Hafez Assad, and how did you manage the language of diplomacy for the release of an American Air Force pilot, Robert Goodman, from Syria as President Hafez Assad?
Well, one thing I did different than President Reagan is I tried. We knew that he had campaigned mightily when President Carter was in about Americans who were held in prison, and that we were weak because we could not get them out unilaterally. We were weak. So I figured if he would do that, then he would let 2 soldiers, one of which was white, who was killed in the plane crash, would let them stay there for a long period of time. So I had met President Assad before when Andy Young spoke to Tursi, the PLO leader in New York. Speaking to him was against American law, and Andy lost his job on that basis. And to protest that, we went to the military, we went to Israel, we went to Palestine, we went to Syria. And so I had met Assad before. I figured if I could get to him, I could convince him that he should let the American soldier be free so as to not let him become a bait as justification for invasion. And so when he allowed me to see him, I thought that was a step in the right direction. And I said to him, Mr. Goodman, through no fault of his own, is in Syria. He cannot hurt you. He needs to go home. And in the time there's a window of opportunity open, it always makes room for more peace and dialogue. And he went back and forth. And I found that whenever there is a great non-communication between our 2 countries, and that is lots of poverty and lack of appreciation of the role of religious leadership, and no talk between the leaders, that there's always this gap of communications. And so he finally released Lieutenant Robert Goodman. And President Reagan said, you shouldn't go, because if you can't get them, it'll show you don't know what you're doing. If we do get him, bring him home. I said, I'll try to get him. And we made a moral appeal with Assad, trying to appeal to his interests. And so Reagan said, well, now that you have brought him back, what can I do for you? I tried to think of one big thing he could do for me. I said, call Mr. Assad and say, thank you for releasing your soldier, which was against our policy. So he called, he thanked him. They never stopped talking. It's something that's basically, they had these positions against each other, but they were not talking. We did the same thing in Cuba with Castro. We could have been connected with Cuba many, many years ago. We finally did under President Obama this past year. The same thing happened in Yugoslavia. We used what we call track diplomacy. We did it in Colombia as well. We did it in Sierra Leone and Liberia. We've gone about 7 different places in the world where there were people held as prisoners and used our moral authority and our knowledge of the way people react and brought Americans home from prison. In one instance, we brought people home from Iraq. They were from France, Britain, Canada, and the U.S. Brought them out of there. Thank you.
It's already midday, so the very last question, please.
Hello, my name is Elbi Adaev. I'm a student here at the Koźmińskiego University. I was born and brought up in a Muslim family. Nevertheless, most of my life I lived here in Poland. That's why it is especially hurtful to see that when it comes to the immigration crisis, many people here lack the basic knowledge of what the others mean, what the others are, who they are. And there is also a lack of willingness to know it. So what would you say, what can we do in order to address this ignorance that is spreading like a fire and has no tendency to burn out?
I think people who react to Muslims as less than human beings ought to appreciate the pain and know how wrong they are morally. They'll remember when they were in a similar predicament. Here come the Poles. We already have problems where we stay. Here come the Jews. We have been here before, so it's not a new phenomenon. Here come the Muslims. I remember when there was a bombing that took place in Oklahoma City some years ago, and it was a terror attack. It was total surprise. And when it took place, they brought in some experts on CNN. So one of where the attacker could have come from, the military journal said, we're not sure who it was, but it looked kind of Middle Easternish. So what did it say? We don't know who it was, but it just looked Middle Easternish. The fact is, it was a Midwesterner, driving a white truck who engaged in a terror attack. But it just shows just how damaged and how far wrong these stereotypes can be, and they should not be. And to think that today that there are millions of American families, to use that as an example, who fear they will be deported and their family will be torn apart, that's very hurtful. And because it's hurtful, it's not right. And I would hope that the students basically accept the challenge of multicultural, multiracial living. Monochromatic nations have no future. Multiracial, multicultural relationships, and the extent to which the issue is Islam here, maybe as Dr. Koźmiński suggested, maybe Dr. Belaki, maybe there should be a course in Islam, maybe a course in human rights, because we must teach to the relevance. If the subject is fear of refugees, maybe there should be a course on refugees, the history of refugees. And for Christians, don't forget, Jesus was a refugee and an immigrant, and would have died at the genocide in Rome had the Egyptians came to his rescue. Friends, I have enjoyed this conversation. Look forward to more of it, and thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. So now, after this exciting 2 hours with you, Reverend Jackson, and this volatile rainbow world, we are even more rainbow people than we were this morning. Thanks to you. So thank you for coming, and let's stay in touch. All the best.
You guys do Twitter here, Twitter? Raise your hand at Twitter. At Rev J. Jackson. Facebook, like me, Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. Let's stay connected. Love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
A, to dobrze wiedzieć. Tak, ja mam tak zapisane.